Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Reduce Tax Season Compression and Increase Capacity with Tech-Enabled Outsourcing Services. First and foremost, we hope that you and your loved ones are happy, healthy, and staying safe. For today's webinar, Wolters, Kluwer, Ray Barlow, Director of Outsource Operations, and David Harris, Tax Manager, will discuss how outsourcing can effectively increase your firm's productivity and create a significant competitive advantage by providing additional capacity, especially during busy season. Before I hand it over to our presenters, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Wolters Kluwer CCH is registered with NASPA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. As such, we are excited to offer 1 CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 4 polls will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you'll need to participate in 3 of them in order to receive CPE. If you experience any technical difficulties when trying to submit your poll response, please make sure you let us know in the questions pane. This way we can record your answer manually and get you your CPE certificate. Your CPE certificate will be sent to the email you used to register for the webinar within 5 business days after the session. If you do not receive your certificate, please email us at marketing@xcmsolutions.com. Please note, CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. You will also have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. You will also have the opportunity to complete a survey about the webinar, our content, learning objectives, and more at the end of the presentation. This survey will also be sent to you in a follow-up email. We appreciate you taking the time to participate in that survey so we can continue to deliver meaningful content in future presentations. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Ray Barlow and David Harris.
Thank you, Alyssa, and welcome everybody to our session today. I'm Ray Barlow. I am the Director of Outsource Operations here at Wolters Kluwer. My primary responsibility is all of our outsourcing services, tax, accounting, and all of the both domestic and international outsourcing services. I'm joined by Dave Harris. Dave, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Ray. David Harris, Tax Compliance Manager here with Wolters Kluwer. Been here, we include XCM for about 7 years. A little bit of history about myself. Been in the CPA space for 14 years, working on high net worth and real estate industry in that practice. Jumped over to the Wolters Kluwer side to help CPA firms outsource with offshore teams. So I facilitate and direct the teams and the firms as they go through outsourcing. So happy to be here today, and Ray, I'll let you start the presentation.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Dave. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get a little bit of a glimpse of our agenda. So we'll first start out talking a little bit about Expatax and the services we provide to accounting firms. Can't have a session without talking about some of the trends in the industry. Some you already know about, some that might be a surprise. The benefits of leveraging an offshore or onshore outsourcing program. What exactly is our Expatax tax preparation services? A little bit about gaining firm buy-in. What are some of the challenges you might face internally within your own firm? And then we'll finish up with the 7216 consent form. So we hope this will give you a pretty good overview of what it would be like to outsource with Expatax. Before I start, we were acquired last year in September. I was part of the XCM Solutions team. We were acquired by Wolters Kluwer back in September. With that came a slew of products, mostly in the workflow area, but also came the Expatax tax outsourcing business as well as our CAS outsourcing business. So now we're all part of the same team. We've been doing tax outsourcing since 2002. The company XCM was actually formed as an outsourcing company when it first was first started. So we've got some experience. We've blended the 2 programs together under the Expatax brand. So it's now Expatax tax outsourcing, both offshore and domestic. Before we get any further, just kind of get a little bit of a view of the audience here and what your experiences are with offshore outsourcing. So I'm going to send this over to Alyssa.
Thank you, Ray. Our first polling question is, what experiences have you had with offshore outsourcing of tax and/or client accounting services? Currently leveraging remote staff for tax and accounting work. Tried in the past, currently not using remote staff. Never tried but interested in learning more. we presently don't have a need for outsourced services. And we'll give everyone just about 30 more seconds. As a reminder, you'll need to complete 3 out of 4 of the polling questions in order to receive your CPE certificate. Just about 15 more seconds. And just about 5 more seconds, and we'll close out the poll. Some interesting results coming in. All right, and I'm going to close the poll and share the results and turn it back over to you, Ray.
All right, thanks, Alyssa. So interesting, 65%, obviously the number one result. Never tried, but interested in learning more, which is great news because we hope to provide you with enough information to make decisions as you move forward. 20% are currently leveraging some level of tax or accounting services, could be offshore with some other firm, it could be with us, who knows. And then some have tried it in the past, but not using it right now. So the good news is everyone has get some interest in what we're talking about today. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about what we do, and when we talk about the types of work that we do, the outsourcing solutions that we have, obviously we have Expatax tax outsourcing both offshore and onshore. Our offshore facility is in Chennai, India, and our onshore obviously in the United States. We do a lot of tax data conversions. Most of those are done offshore, as well as our Expatax CAS remote staffing, which is mostly what we do is bookkeeping work, accounting transactions. We also do audit support, and we also do litigation support. So that team is capable of doing a lot of different things. And coming soon, hopefully this quarter or next quarter, will be our Expatax Scan Verify solution. More to follow on that at a later time. So within the Expatax services, these are some of the things that we do. On the left, you can see our tax prep services, primarily individual, corporate. Pretty much we do most all returns. Most firms are sending us 1040, although this year we had a significant uptick in the amount of corporate or entity returns that we received, but we do a wide range of different return types, not just 1040s. On the right side, you can see some of the client accounting services we provide. Mostly, you're going to see this as bookkeeping, bank and credit card reconciliation work, along with AP, AR, and obviously we're doing some other things like journal entries and basic daily bookkeeping is what we're doing on that side. And that's become a big, there's been a lot of interest in that area as staffing becomes a challenge. So when you look at our US-based outsource team here at WK, we have a pretty good size team in terms of what we're offering. Obviously, we always have our consulting and training team. They partner with Dave Harris, who's with me today, on making certain that you folks get up and running through the implementation training part of this. We have our support team, which Dave does a lot of work in the support area, and also for our CAS team, we have another person, Robin Mangum, who does that. For business development, we have a few folks that help with working with you folks on presenting what we have, answering your questions, doing a lot of different things, and those are our solution architects. So basically, we've got a pretty good team based in the US supporting the outsource function. So let's talk a little bit about the trends in the industry. I've heard a lot so far, and it's only July, about some of the challenges already within the accounting industry. But I think what we've seen for the last couple of years is more of an interest in moving some of the work that you do today to an offshore partner or an outsourcing partner. Today, firms are looking for that middle layer, people who can work with clients, people can help provide advisory work, all different types of work. And so they're moving a lot of the so-called data entry work to outsource providers like us. And that seems to be a trend that's continuing over the last couple of years. We continue to see a rise in the amount of interest and the amount of work that's being sent our way. So we know it's something that's become very mainstream. And this slide that I'm showing you today is actually a slide I borrowed from Barry Melanson from the AICPA, who put this slide up back a few years ago at a big conference that I was attending. So we know that it's on the radar of everyone, including the AICPA. So we're back to another poll. What is your, go ahead, Alyssa, I'm gonna let you take this one.
Great, thank you. The next polling question is, what is your plan to move back to the office? We plan to return to business as usual in the office. We plan to implement a hybrid approach, office and remote. We plan to continue to hire work from home only people. We plan to remain remote, or both B and C. We'll give everyone about 30 more seconds to complete the poll. Just about 15 more seconds. As a reminder, you'll need to complete 3 of 4 polling questions in order to receive your CPE. All right, and we're going to close the poll and share the results. And I'll turn it back over to you, Ray.
All right, thanks, Alyssa. Interesting results. I think each time I look up, there's a change, and we have significant plans here at WK on back to office, and a lot of those plans are obviously based on what's happening in the world today around pandemics. But 48% plan to continue a hybrid approach, which is basically office and remote, which seems to be what I hear most often now. I think firms have recognized that there is a capability to work remotely, and we're seeing that over time now become even more of a mainstream strategy. So each year we take a look at the AFOT survey, which surveys what's the some of the top challenges you face in the workplace, and clearly the most recent survey we looked at the recruiting. We looked at what were the top challenges for accounting firms, and what's interesting is recruiting and retention again is number 1. Raising profitability is number 2. But the difference between number 1 and number 2 has really been extended far more than it was before. There's a 10-point difference between number 1 and number 2 now. And we know that there's challenges in the workplace, finding people, finding workers, hiring, recruiting still remains a huge challenge. A lot of it is because of millennials who have a different view of life-work balance. And I think that's going to remain the same today. I was reading recently that by 2025, millennials will make up the majority of the workforce, and I think that's going to. And so, as a result of that, they will make up the majority of your clients too. So I think there's a big change ahead, and I think millennials are driving this change around what they want out of work and how that's going to impact how accounting firms move forward. There's also challenges with remote work. We, as we saw before, the hybrid model continues, and we see it as something that will continue moving forward. But it has created an even more of a challenge with competition for talent. Now, people who are working remotely are being recruited from all over the country. And you can find someone who's working in Kansas who may get a job offer from a firm in New York City. And with that comes a much higher potential for salary and earnings. And this is creating what we're seeing now is a much higher than normal turnover in accounting firms. I was talking to an industry person not too long ago who said in the firms that he's talking to, the average turnover now is between 11 and 54%. And in one particular case, a firm that has always run very low single-digit turnover is seeing mid-20% turnover, 25% turnover right now. And I think this is all a result of remote work. And as you see, remote work is going to continue. So this competition for talent is going to increase as well. And obviously, cloud technology really is table stakes when it comes to remote work. So all of this is having a tremendous impact on how everyone does their work and how firms look at staffing. You know, there's certainly a lot of talk around, you know, AI and machine learning and RPA, but you still need people to push the buttons. And if you don't have the people to push the buttons, AI doesn't do much for you. So I'm going to turn this over to Dave now, and Dave's going to talk a little bit about our Expat benefits. Dave?
Sure, Ray. So before I do, Ray, I think there's a couple slides here right now, and we don't think we saw the last few slides that you had. So if you can just reshare your slides or advance them to see if they scroll up, please.
Can you see them now?
I cannot. It still says, what is your plan to move back to the office?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me try resharing. You know, I think this isn't great technology we've got here. Can you see my screen now?
Now I can, yep. So let's advance
Okay.
tax benefits.
Okay, back to you, Dave.
All right, great. Let's talk about the extra tax benefits. So on the next slide, we do have some benefits that we do like to go through. You know, what does outsourcing mean? You know, from a survey we've done, what does it mean to firms, and how do they look at and approach outsourcing today within their practice? So we have 4 items here. There is a 5th one. We'll wait till the end for that one. Greater capacity is the #1 reason. Not the #1 reason, but it is a high reason of why firms are looking to outsource today, which carries into growth and training. Being in the industry or the profession, tax preparers, what you want them to do is learn and grow, correct? So what we do is, or what they do is send returns to the offshore teams, and when they come back, have them review it. When I was in practice, I was often told to always act 2 levels up than what you're at. So if you're a preparer, act as a supervisor or a junior supervisor. If you're a senior, act as a manager, etc. So opportunity for growth, a lot of firms leverage it for that. And while they're doing that, is for managers and partners to focus on the value-added services. Now today, preparers as well want to focus on those, and additionally along with managers. So not just doing the data entry of the tax return, not doing just the compliance work, looking at tax opportunities outside of that compliance work. Everyone wants to work on that, so that's what you want to focus on. Increased work-life balance, as Ray mentioned before, you know, where we are today, what the profession is going to make up of, you know, he mentioned his life-work balance, which is great because life comes first over work, or at least that's what some people may view it as. Today, with the state of where we are, as you can see, I think it's coming forth and it's coming forward with that, with the work from home. Saw in that polling that some are going through the hybrid approach. Also reading an article today, it just came up today in CPA Trendlines. The headline is remote staffing is here to stay, and it just showed that a lot of firms are now going with that hybrid approach. So that's helping with the work-life balance. And then the last item here that we're going to have up here is better client service. What we're focused on is servicing our clients, reaching out to them quickly. In today's world, with the technology we have, it's all about quickness. How call it fast, or how soon can you connect with your client from the time that information comes in through the door, and to get the tax return out and filed on time. Again, better client service. Moving on, we look at the next slide. We have, again, it's kind of a workflow here in what, you know, kind of if firms outsource with us, okay? What this shows here is on the right-hand side, and it shows in 2017 and 2018, that's just where we pulled data from, that you can see in orange or red that 57% more returns were filed and completed over firms that didn't outsource. So firms that outsourced, there was a higher percentage of completed by the deadline than there was from firms that did not outsource. Okay, so this is infographics showing you also from firms matched up to other firms alike. Well, how many returns were not started, how many returns in process, so you can see in the pie chart to the left, how many returns were completed, etc. So it's a good indicator to show that using an offshore team can accelerate the work that you have, reduce that compression to be able to get returns on out the door. Then when we do that, next slide, we'll show you a progress report. Progress reports, these come out during tax season. What they do and what they are is when you sign on with Wolters, Kluwer, and Tax to outsource, we go through the budget and determine what amount of returns will come during the certain peak weeks. We know that during tax season, it's very low in the January. Can't really count that. Well, you can count it as tax season, but from an individual standpoint, tax season doesn't really start until mid-February. But if you're outsourcing entity returns, partnerships, S corps, the flow-through entities, certainly those come through in January. But what we do is we graph out where we anticipate and what the expectation is of the returns and when we'll receive them. And then in blue, it shows you the flow of how many returns is sent by week and see if you're on track. And this is to give a guide, so make sure that we don't end up in a compression mode ourselves. And it's to, again, guide firms to see where they stand and how they're doing. Next part, we talk about customer feedback. We often hear good statements about, or great statements about how firms view us and how it's really helped them. So if you read through some of this, if you have the slides after the presentation today, just mention, we talked about compression, right? One said, okay, well, we had 80 new returns and I couldn't have done them unless or if I didn't have extra tax. So it was great to have extra tax because I was able to get that additional 80 returns, which are new clients, which helped us, okay? Makes our deadline so much easier, makes it smoother. Again, reducing that compression. Bottlenecks, if we go back to the top, keep the pipeline moving. Again, compression, that's what they're focused on. And then lastly, the last comment is taking a higher level look. This is the staffing and training that we mentioned earlier on a few slides ago. And do more research, planning, consultant, etc. That's where they're focused, and that's where people want to be today, right? Not just doing the compliance work of entering information in a tax return. Now, again, that training, you certainly need to do that to learn as well. I get it. I understand it. You're not going to not do that at all. But again, it's to make their position more well-rounded and focus on many different areas. So as we do that now, once you obtain an offshore team, we'll go through in the extra tax preparation process and kind of what it looks like. What we do is we allocate teams to your firm. So it's dedicated teams of staff. So look in here, it's 2 preparers, 1 supervisor, and a senior manager. Preparers, what do they do? Bookmarking of a tax data, a PDF file, data entry of the return prep, and the 150 prep capacity. So each preparer can prepare 150 returns within a tax season, provided that the workflow is consistent and it kind of lays out as planned. Certainly, a preparer cannot do 150 returns if you outsource between the weeks of last week of March and the first 2 weeks of April, right? So the workflow needs to be there. Supervisor oversees those 2 preparers. Again, review capacity 300, and then the senior manager there is really there to review complex returns, but the supervisor to meet with, to talk about high complex areas, etc. So if you look at the years experience here, managers 7 to 10 years, we're heading into more years than, not higher, but our staff today are more than 7 to 10 years. We're reaching up to the 12 to 15. A lot of the managers and some of the supervisors we have today have been with us a really long time. Preparers, those are at the equivalent of a 2 to 3 year staff. So again, building capacity with the same team that you would have working on your firm today. If we look at how we build that highly skilled team, we look at individuals that have gone through, that are in the accounting industry, okay? Chartered accountants, that's what they have in the offshore offices, chartered accountants. Did they go through schooling? Where are they with their schooling? Where are they with their training? We also provide a training program here at Expatax. We go through aptitude testing. We go through extensive training, classroom sessions, hands-on training. The best part about training in how we train is really simulating a peak season scenario. So we have a lot of training returns that we can do and simulate a peak season within the months of August, September, October, November, whenever we want to simulate that scenario of how many returns you're going to get at, different types of returns, different scenarios. That helps with the training for people coming on board to really understand what does tax season look like at the end of the day. Certification, high-level training, and then refresher training. We're constantly training. Any downtime we have, we're doing some sort of training, whether it be on items that we've done during tax season or new tax law, the ever-changing tax laws these days, of what that looks like and how do we approach that within a tax return. Once you're outsourcing with us, I'll show you the step to do so. So 4 steps here. What do you do? Okay, firms provide a source documents. So same thing you might have today. You receive source documents, you put them into a package or some sort of document management system. So you take that package, you would provide it within XCM. So information is scanned on your end, firm uploads needed documents, that goes into our website, that gets us, transmits the data to the teams, and then our teams go in and prepare the return, and then it's returned to you within 48 hours. So we prepare from the information that is provided at that time. Does that mean you cannot send it again? You can certainly send it multiple times. So again, the idea is compression. Keep them moving through the door, okay? So keeping them moving through the door, you would outsource it at the time of first touch when it first comes in. Okay. So moving on to the next slide. Yeah. We have an area to upload documents in that. It's kind of indicated here where it shows the files. And what that does is, if you can go back to that one slide for a minute, please. Thank you. So, yeah, so it's attaching the files here within a task page. So that task page within XCM, again, we help you set that up, but that's where documents sit. You have visibility into where those documents sit and how they look. Going on to the next slide, Ray, visibility into where are they? So this is a dashboard of the XCM product and what you would have to use. So when you're starting to outsource returns with the team, you'll have full visibility into the status. So on the admin side, before you outsource with us, you start to queue returns up, okay? That's what we call to be outsourced. You kind of line them up here. When you're ready to outsource them, then we can move it to outsourced. There is also an item called outsource awaiting acceptance that comes last. As you can see down below, it has outsourced 404. That shows you what is the status of the returns we sent to the team, to the outsourced status. Is it in preparation? Is it in final review? Or is it awaiting bookmarking? So again, you have full visibility into the status of that return within using XCM today. Now, let's take a look at the work papers. So we go through and we bookmark a PDF file. Okay, it goes in the same order of an organizer, same order of what would come out of your tax software today. Okay, so we also put in annotations. So we have bookmarks there, so that's highlighted there in red on the left. And then if we click again, we go through a highlighting tool that's going to highlight the years. So this is, if we put into the system, please scan the file for 2017. It's going to highlight all the documents that have the 2017 tax year. We want to be sure we're working with the correct data for the correct year. We all know that sometimes clients send us a package, maybe there's dual household, maybe there's information in there, or maybe there's information from last year that got mixed up into this year's. Then we also go and verify the social security number. So once we click on that part, we highlight the social security number. Again, making sure we're using the correct taxpayer information. I mentioned it before, dual household, you never know, information might get caught up in what that package was sent to you therefore. Once we do that, we put in some hyperlinks. The hyperlink is by the blue box. That blue box is once you click on that blue box, it brings you to the next page where it found it before. So you see that coming up. It shows you that $600 worth of interest income was found on that other page within the PDF file. Once we click on the blue box on the below, it goes back to the page on where you were before. Once you've verified that $600, firms are going to sign off. I'm going to click on the right-hand side, and then we'll click again on the left-hand side. There's many different spots for firms to sign off on, 3 or 4. It may not go through that many levels, but there's a color for each firm sign off. That way each person might pick a color that they want. So once they click on that firm 1 sign off, they'll click again and they'll show that the bookmark on the left has turned to the same color. So once you click on that, there's the same color. So once all the bookmarks turn that same color that you've chosen, you know you've reviewed every single page within that PDF file. So moving on to the next part, workbook. We also supply a workbook, which is in Excel, that shows you kind of where information is coming from. So let's go back to that $600 that we referenced to before, and where does that land within the workbook? So you can see down below within the worksheets, we have detailed worksheets, for Schedule B, Schedule D, whatever it might be, tax payments, etc. This example, it's for Schedule B. So we have that $600. If we look on the left-hand side, we have, it's a page number 21, that page number 21. So this Excel is hyperlinked to the PDF. So once you click on the 21, it brings you to page 21 of the PDF, which ties out to that number of $600 that you were tying out to before. Once you verify that, you click on the sign off and click again on the sign off. You show that it turns your color as needed. Now let's talk about the summaries on the worksheets down below. So if we click on the 2650 down below, you can see that it highlights there. So 2650 is 500. So there's a total of interest. We also have a control sheet. So that control sheet totals up the detailed sheets behind it. So it should tie out on a tax return. What line numbers are they? Now, from this example, it's an older example, so those line numbers are not the current ones today, but they were back in 2017. So that's to tie out to your tax return. What would that look like, and how do you reference that at the end of the day? Looking ahead to the tax software and kind of what we use, here's a whole list of tax software that we can work in for the outsourcing. So if you're using ProFX, Access, Tax Prep, Canadian Prep, we can work with that. Thomson Reuters products, Intuit products, Drake, and a few more. As long as it's a software that we can have access to or have a license for, we can work within that software that you're currently using today. Now, after we go through that portion of, okay, we're going to move forward, we're going to outsource with Expatax, kind of what does implementation and training look like? So 4 steps here. We kind of identify participation. Who's going to be the firm members? What's going to be the selection process for clients? How are we going to distribute information? Ray's going to talk about consent letters a little later on in this presentation, but it's really what's the selection process? Who's going to get a consent form? That's if we're doing offshore. If you're doing domestic, no consent form required. After that, we determine how are we going to distribute that? Well, what are we going to distribute it with? Do we send it with an engagement letter? Do we send it with a cover letter? Or do we send it blindly, on its own? Certainly timing is a factor of that, of when you're going to send a consent form if you go with the offshore option. Certainly you want to do that earlier on. That way when you get to January or February that you probably might have some consents unpacked. So you're kind of starting to create that pool. After you kind of have that distribution, now it's communication in everyone in the firm. Is it a single office? Is it a multi-office? How are we going to roll that out? Okay, and then it's training within the XCM application, the workflow within the application, sending and receiving files, the work papers that I just went through, etc. Now, it might look like there's a lot of sections of the training, but the training does not take that long. All of that training can be done within an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it can be done a couple of times, or there's support as well to reach out as needed. It's a very simple process from the XCM side of using that product to get information from point A to point B. Now, that's going to bring us, I believe, into our next section, gaining firm buy-in. But I think before we do, we have a polling question that is coming right up. So, Alyssa, I'll let you take on with the polling question.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to launch the third polling question. What is your biggest challenge to obtaining firm buy-in for outsourcing? Don't want to have to deal with the 7216 client consent form, quality of tax preparation service, loss of control of return, security of client information, or partner objection. This is 3 of the 4 polling questions, and as a reminder, you'll need to complete 3 of 4 in order to receive your CPE certificate. We'll give everyone about 20 to 30 more seconds to complete this polling question. Just about 15 more seconds. All right, and we're going to close the poll and share the response. And I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, great. All right.
Thank you.
I was going to take on these just to kind of go through
Sure.
the polling items. So it looks pretty even across the board for most part. We're in the 20% range here. But that's consistent. There's a percentage of, okay, don't want to deal with the consent form. What's it going to look like? What's the quality, security, loss of control, right? Now, partner objection, surprisingly, that's low. Although I shouldn't say surprisingly, in the past, probably 2012 or before when the consent form was enacted in 2009 by the IRS, that partner objection would have been a lot higher. Today, it's starting to go away. More partners are gaining more and more receptive to it. So it's not really becoming an obstacle as it was before. Now it's a loss of control, quality, what's that going to look like? And with that spread, that's good to see that each one of those, it's something we can get you through fairly easily, fairly quickly to have basically everyone on board to move forward. It's a really simple approach and a really simple process. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ray.
Thanks, Dave. So not that we kind of know these objections because we've heard them before, but we did kind of put up here some of the typical things we've heard in the past. And certainly, some of the things that were in our poll were not here. We didn't necessarily have a place for client perception. The reason for that is most clients will listen to what you folks say and what the partner says, and whatever is needed to be done, they're typically okay with it. Those that may object, you don't have to outsource to, but we don't see that this as an advantage necessarily that clients will see financially. We see this as an advantage from a better client service perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about security and quality. And then loss of control. You notice that we use XCM workflow to move returns back and forth between your office and our offices. If you don't have XCM workflow, we provide a version of XCM workflow just for outsourcing that allows you to move returns back and forth. The only difference is you cannot in-source returns in a workflow manner, so it doesn't necessarily do workflow for you on internal returns, but it does, and it does come at no charge. We can provide up to 10 licenses for no cost for just the XCM for outsource version. So that shouldn't be an issue if you don't have XCM workflow. But let's talk a little bit more about some of these things that we've heard about offshore outsourcing. As far as security goes, Expatax has their own SOC 2 certification annually. We've been doing it for the last 5 years. We're very secure. We've not had, and I should knock on wood, but we've not had any issues as far back as I can remember. And it's because we take very, very cautious steps in making certain that everything we do is protected and that your data is protected as well. Your data never really leaves the United States. It sits in our data center in the Boston area. So basically our team reaches in and grabs the data. They don't have hard drives, they don't have cameras, smartphones, anything like that. They just basically are able to work on the return directly from the US. So we keep the security at a very high level, and we're probably even more secure now that we're part of Wolters Kluwer. So from a security standpoint, no issues. Quality. This is the most recent survey from our turnaround from this past tax season. Quality turnaround time. So our quality improved to 99.86%, which is pretty good. I know we do a lot of returns, but that's still a lot of returns returned without any quality issues. I'm very confident in our quality. We do have an audit that just came in today, and so we audited all of the returns we did on top of having our customers provide us information, and the 99.86 dropped to about 99.5%. So even after auditing all of our returns ourselves, our audit results still came in pretty strong at 99.5%. Our turnaround time is industry leader. 94+% of our returns are returned within 24 hours. 99.81% within 48 hours. These are actual times. These are not estimates. This is actually what we did this year. We had 37 firms exceed their commitment with us, which usually is a good thing. And this was the most returns we've done since the inception of the program. Lost returns, most returns completed since the inception of the program. And this year we had a significant increase. I had mentioned this earlier in the number of business returns. So it's now 16% of our total, our entity returns, and a lot of that was driven by multiple top 100 firms who came to us asking for us to help them even further. So a good result overall from this past year, which gives me a lot of good opportunities for you folks as well. So when we talk about ROI, this is just a typical ROI. You may save money on doing the work. There's an economic value in outsourcing returns to us. We're less expensive than offshore than it would be to have your own tax preparer. This is just an example of a firm that has about 1,500 returns, 1040s, 100 returns are being outsourced. We plug some other information in there, which your average fee, 500, yours could be higher. What's the annual cost for labor? I don't know for sure, but we plugged in 1.5 million, and then some other areas. And when we plug in all of this, we look at our actual return on investment here, and in this case, it's $40,000 in savings by outsourcing 100 returns to us for that year. So basically, you're replacing one preparer probably with our preparer, and you can see the value of doing that in terms of what it brings to you in return on your investment. We're more than happy to talk more detail on pricing at a later time. So we talk about building your strategy. This is something that's key to how we move forward. It used to be in some cases way back when that sometimes we were considered kind of an insurance policy in case you needed, in case something went wrong. Those days are gone. We're much more strategic now in how firms approach outsourcing with us. So the first thing, you want to evaluate your situation, and then determine what work you want to redistribute, what type of returns, which clients. Do you want to go international, domestic? Domestic is not going to save you any money. We're paying the same fees that you probably are paying for outsource, for the outsource piece. So we're hiring the same kinds of people that you would be hiring. So it's more or less a capacity situation with domestic. International will save you a significant amount of money overall. Who will be the outsource coordinator? Who's the person who will be responsible for moving the work? Typically it's an admin. Who moves the work to us, gets the work, gets the returns back, make sure they're sent to the appropriate person for review. And then how will you how you track the consent forms? Typically where they're tracked in XCM workflow. And then, who will determine which, ultimately, who makes the decision as to which returns get sent to us? Assuming there's a consent on file if it's international. And the last thing is, what are you going to do differently? We hope that you might have some of your preparers reviewing those returns, or maybe you have to work less hours, maybe you have to hire a few less interns, but overall, there's got to be something different about how you go about tax season if you're leveraging our outsourcing services. So those are some of the things we'll work with you folks on. So we talked about the 7216 consent. It is there's a specific requirement around the 1040 family. You have to use a certain consent form, and I'll show it to you in a second. On the business side, not so much. You do have to let your customer know, your client know, but it's in the way of any engagement letter that you might send, where you might say there's a third-party preparer that you might use that's offshore, whatever it might be. You still have to notify them, but you don't have to use the language that's required by the IRS for 1040 family. And this is what the consent form looks like in the upper right-hand corner. It has to be exactly like this, to the extent that it's in the same font as what the IRS has distributed. And so you need to provide that letter to your clients for their signature. You can provide a cover letter, and we have a sample cover letter here. I also have another sample I'll show you from one of our customers. But this is what you need to do to be compliant with the IRS. We have found our best practice for getting these letters signed off is by sending them electronically. The use of digital signatures, whatever digital signature program that you have, increases the amount of consent results up to as much as 80% positive results. You're always going to get a certain percentage. So if it's 80% come in yes, you're probably going to see 15% of those folks not respond. Maybe they're the same people who never respond. And then maybe 2 to 5% may ask why. And that's where the cover letter comes in and really explains your reasoning for providing these services. But if they're not happy about it or they don't want you to do it, that's fine. You don't have to do it. You would just not do it for that particular client. Hopefully there'll be plenty of others that you can do it for. And I think that's really what it boils down to when we talk about, client perception. The perception is that you're outsourcing the entire return process and you're not. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So I want to talk about this letter. This is a sample letter from an actual customer of ours that we helped them build. I think when you look at it, the first most important thing is the firm is always looking at ways to provide higher quality services. In that first paragraph, that's what they talk about. You're going to get a much better and a much more efficient. We're going to become much more efficient, which will result in a better quality services for the client. The second thing, don't be afraid to identify the relationship with your tax prep partner, in this case, Expatax. And because that shows that you have a working relationship with them, and it makes it a little bit easier for the customer to understand what's going on. The third thing is be very clear, that make sure the client knows that the firm is still responsible for the return. Expatax may do the basic data entry in an effort to help the firm, but ultimately the firm is responsible for reviewing that return and filing that return. They are the firm's client. And the last thing is, make sure you show the due diligence on the vendor. Talk about the security capabilities of that vendor and the overall capabilities from a technology standpoint, the experience that vendor has. And then even if you choose not to consent, that's fine. You'll still get tax preparation services from the firm. So it is okay not to consent to the 7216. And that's what the sample cover letter does, gives you that explanation of really what you're about to, what they need to understand as far as tax outsourcing goes. Alyssa, I think we have one last poll, and then if we have time, questions. I'm not sure if we have any.
Great. Yep, this is our last polling question. And just, would you like to learn more about Expatax tax outsourcing? And we do have one question while this poll is being answered. We have Rain or Dave answer this for us. A question came in about the benefits of integrating a workflow solution such as XCM Workflow into your outsourcing services.
Yeah, I'll attempt to do that, and Dave, you can follow up with any additional information. But we feel that the best place from a workflow perspective, from a process perspective within a firm, is to have the integrated or the outsourcing component integrated into the existing workflow solution, where all you do is select, do I want to send this to a preparer in US for my outsourced partner? Do I want to send it to a preparer in India for my outsourced partner? Or do I want to send it to a preparer internally within the firm? All of it's in one place. You don't have to worry about going to multiple places to figure out where things are. I just don't know of a better way to do this. And that's why here at Wolters Kluwer, we're moving all of the original CCH outsource business onto the XCM platform. So everyone who outsources with Wolters Kluwer and Expatax will be leveraging the XCM platform, either the free version, or if you're an XCM workflow customer, the normal version moving forward. It just makes things so much easier. You have visibility, you have the statuses, you know exactly where the return is, and you can use the point section to ask questions, to give instructions, to provide follow-up. It just seems like a logical place for this integration to occur, and so we think that's the best practice, and so we'll move forward with XCM Workflow, which will become Access Workflow at the beginning of next year. I don't know if Dave, you have any more to add, but
No, right, that's exactly correct. You know, within the XCM application, everything right there. One system, one thing to do, and multiple systems.
Yeah, the last thing you want is another platform, another place to go to find information. Once we integrate XCM Workflow or Access Workflow into the Access suite, you can still get it standalone, but if you have Access, if you're an Access customer already, you will now be able to integrate this right into your Access platform, and basically one place to go to get all of the information you need relative to doing tax returns. This also works in client accounting services area. XCM works in the client accounting services area as well as in audit. So basically you can have one platform firm-wide to do all of the work that you need to do for your clients.
Great, thank you. There's also one more question. Where can I find more detailed information on the process and pricing? And is there a minimum number a firm has to commit to?
Yeah, if you need more information on, and we can go a little bit more detailed in the process, and we probably just connect with your sales rep. If you don't know who that is, I believe we have our information right here. Actually, I don't know that I have my email address, but you can reach out to me or Dave. I'm raymond.barlow@wolterskluwer.com. And we can point you in the right direction. If you know who your sales rep is, reach out to your sales rep. They'll set up a demo where we can walk through the entire process. And what was the second half of the question, Alyssa?
Is there a minimum number a firm has to commit to?
There's no minimum number you have to commit to. We recommend 100 returns because at least that gives you the ability to do something differently. We feel we can make an impact on your capacity issues at 100 returns. If that's a problem, we can work it out. If 100 returns is a problem, we'll talk to you. But for the most part, if you're going to see a significant result from this, we think a minimum of 100 returns will give you that result.
Great, thank you. That is the end of our questions. There's nothing else from Ray or Dave. That will conclude our webinar.
All right, thank you everyone. Appreciate the time today. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to your sales rep or give myself or Dave a shout, and we can work back with you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.